Welcome back to Lingoni English. My name is Emily. In this video, we are going to look at the use of would and used to refer to past actions. Let's get started. I used to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning for work. This means that in the past, I woke up at 4 a.m., but I don't do that anymore. We use used to express that. Let's continue our story. Back then, I would always be so tired and grumpy until I had my coffee. This also means that I would repeatedly feel tired and grumpy in the past when I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So we can use both used to and would to show that something happened repeatedly in the past, but it does not happen anymore. When writing or speaking, it's nice to change your sentences up a little bit. It would be very boring and repetitive to only use used to. Here's an example. When I started my first job, I used to wake up really early. And I used to immediately make a pot of coffee when I got out of bed. I used to make eggs every day for breakfast, and I often burned them. When I burnt the eggs, I used to have to remake them, and it used to make me late for work. I used to be late for work a lot. Okay, that sounded a little weird and repetitive. Let's try it again. When I started my first job, I would wake up early and immediately make a pot of coffee when I got out of bed. I'd eat eggs every day for breakfast, but I often burned them. When I burned the eggs, I'd have to remake them, and it would often make me late for work. I used to be late for work a lot. That second version sounds a lot better. That's why it's so important to use both would and used to describe actions that were repeated in the past, but don't happen anymore. It's also nice to add in a little bit of the simple past to your story to create variety as well. If you look back at the second version of my story, you'll see I threw in a little bit of past simple to change things up. So now that you know how helpful it is to use both would and used to, why don't we look a little closer at how and when we use them? First, let's take a look at would. To form sentences with would, you have the subject plus would plus the base form of the verb. Every summer, I would visit my grandmother. She would always be happy to see me. We'd spend all day in the kitchen making cakes and cookies together. Here are some extra notes on would. When speaking or writing informally, make sure you contract it. I would, I'd. She would, she'd. Sometimes people use would to convey nostalgia or remembering good times in the past and maybe even wanting to go back. Okay, now let's move on to used to. To form sentences with used to, you have the subject plus used to plus the base form of the verb. Every summer, I used to visit my grandmother. She used to be so happy to see me. We used to spend all day in the kitchen making cookies and cakes together. Here are some extra notes on using used to. First, let's look at the pronunciation. When speaking in sentences, you'll often say used to instead of used to because it flows better. I used to do that. She used to do that. Used to. Also, we often use used to emphasize the repetitive nature of something. Great. Now let's look closer at choosing between would and used to. Number 1. Only use would when the time frame has already been established. When I was a kid, we would play outside for hours. First, give the time frame. When I was a kid. The second part of the sentence has the would in it. When I was a kid, we would play outside for hours. You don't always have to explicitly say the time frame because sometimes it's understood. Think back to my story from a minute ago. I used to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning for work. Back then, I would be so tired and grumpy until I had my coffee. I couldn't start this story with I would wake up because there's no context. However, it works in the second sentence because you already know I'm talking about my job that I started in the past. You understand the time frame. Used to does not have this rule. You can say used to with or without establishing time in the beginning. I used to eat meat. I used to go to school every day. I used to be good friends with her. If you choose to specify a time, it can come either before or after the used to. When I was a kid, we used to play outside for hours. Or, we used to play outside for hours when I was a kid. The second way to decide if you should use would or used to is to think about whether the thing you're talking about was a repeated past action or an extended past state. We cannot use would for extended or permanent states in the past. We can only use used to. For example, I used to live in Texas. That's correct. But I would live in Texas has a different meaning. Living somewhere is an extended state. So if you lived somewhere in the past, you need to use used to. Note that I would live in Texas is a grammatically correct sentence in English, but the meaning is totally different. Let's look at another example. I used to be in love with him. That's correct. But I would be in love with him does not mean that I loved someone for an extended period of time in the past. Being in love is an extended state. So again, you have to use used to. So in summary, we say used to with repeated past actions, temporary or repeated states, and permanent states that are no longer happening. We only use would with repeated past actions that are no longer happening. We cannot use would with extended or permanent states in the past. If you cannot decide which one to use, the safer option is used to. It's important to use would, as I stated in the beginning of the video, but when in doubt, go with used to. It can be used in a variety of different situations. Okay, let's do a little practice. I'll say a few sentences, and you decide if they're correct or incorrect. Let's get started. I used to go camping in the mountains every summer. That's correct. I would live in Oklahoma, but now I live in Germany. That's incorrect. You need to say, I used to live in Oklahoma, but now I live in Germany. This is an extended state. We used to go to the movies every Friday night. That's correct. I would know her well, but we haven't talked in ages. Nope, that's incorrect. I used to know her well, but we haven't talked in ages. This is an extended state. Back in high school, I would often go to football games with friends. It was really fun. Yep, that's right. Well, that's it. I hope you have a better understanding now of when you should use would and when you should use used to. In the comment section below, why don't you tell us about a few things you used to do as a kid? Be sure to use both would and used to in your sentences. Thanks for watching Lingoni English. See ya!